Shal, thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to tell you about our keynote speaker this evening. He is the first runner up at 2015 World Championship of Public Speaking from over 35,000 public speakers around the globe. This sought after professional speaker enchants the audience not only on stage but on papers too. Indeed, a regular columnist at numerous journals worldwide. He is a thought leader in behavior and leadership qualities. He has addressed audiences in over 15 countries and 25 cities across continents. He is going to take us through a session on communicating with impact in disruptive times. Please put your hands together and help me give the warmest welcome to our keynote speaker, an inspiring speaker, an influential writer, a charismatic management consultant, and most importantly, a distinguished Toastmaster, Mr. Aditya Maheswaran, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Sometimes, sometimes it feels so good if the sessions end with such introductions and without speech to follow. But it's lovely to be here. Anamika, just to ensure the tech's working, are you able to hear me well? Yeah, loud and clear.
Yeah.
Terrific. Converse, congratulations on the fifth anniversary. It's uh, not all clubs and groups live to see such a day, and you have survived through 5 years. But I guess, like with any anniversary that's being celebrated this year, you might have envisioned a different kind of celebration if you were given a choice. But here we've ended up in our digital world, and that actually made us connect from me living in London and most of you in India. So there is some kind of advantage in this as well. So it's wonderful to meet and greet all of you today. We are clearly living in difficult times. That's a given. That's not an assumption this year. And seeing how 2020 is panning out, I don't think it will be the last situation of difficulty we find ourselves in, either this year or in the years to come. Things seem to be moving in a warp speed these days, that difficult times are not a luxury of once in 6 months or once a year, but it seems something seems to be popping up every other day. This means that yes, you will find yourself having to communicate difficult messages in difficult times much more often than you've done before. Even though in this pandemic, you might still not be in positions to take difficult decisions like layoffs or salary cuts. Who knows, in a couple of years, you might still have to do that. Whether it be asking people to adopt to new ways of working, or asking people to move to online meetings, or asking people to do things that they're not paid to do, or taking decisions such as pay cuts or layoffs, or just motivating people towards performance when everything around them is depressing or disappointing. They're all difficult communications, isn't it? And this is where crucial conversations are so important. And leaders are finding themselves taking extraordinary choices these days. But extraordinary choices come with an extraordinary task of communicating these to the organization. So today, we're going to look at certain things that you can equip yourself with, or certain questions you can ask yourselves that will probably help you communicate in disruptive times or tough times, either today or in the tough times to come. Having worked with leaders over the last 5 months, especially through the pandemic, every day as a consultant, as a leadership consultant, management consultant, goes either thinking about or working with clients, leaders, CXOs in their journey to accelerate out of the pandemic, and which always comes with communicating messages often and well. I have found that there are three yardsticks or three questions you can ask yourself, leaders can ask themselves, all of us can ask ourselves before exercising influence, before communicating our messages. And the very first question that I have found useful is asking, is my communication purposeful? Is it purposeful? Now, for communication to be purposeful, I work with leaders and I work with communicators to put the test, to put their communication through three tests, or three filters, or three litmus tests. They are, is my message clear, compelling, and consequential? Is my message clear, compelling, and consequential? What do these mean? So the first test of is my communication purposeful? Is my message clear? Now, clear means what is at the core of what I'm trying to say, and has that got across to my audience or people? What is the soul of what I'm trying to say? And in the process of sugarcoating it in a crisis, is that soul of what I'm trying to say lost? And why is it difficult to be clear? It seems the easiest thing to do, isn't it? Being clear. But it's difficult because in difficult times, in disruptive times, because of all the self-help books and leadership yarns we have read in our lives, we put too much pressure on ourselves to be more inspirational than required, to a point of fault, to a point, in fact, where in the recent past, leaders have started insulting the intelligence of their audiences by saying something which is so beautiful. But everybody knows you don't need to say that. We know we are in difficult times. Give it us as it is. Call a spade a spade. Let me give you an example. I was working with a CEO a few months ago, and he was telling me, Aditya, I need to devise this email, a communication to my organization. I said, what's at the heart of what you want to say? He said, between you and I, Aditya, I just have to tell them that I have to let go 10% of the workforce, right? But I can't just say that. I'm going to prepare an email draft and send it to you, which is more inspiring. And you tell me, Aditya, as a consultant, can you advise me to shape this email a little better? So this is what he sent me, and I'm going to read this out to you verbatim. Here's how it goes. One paragraph in that email. It says, the only failing now will be failing to fail. As we move from me to we to us, we need to embrace complexities that makes it difficult to synergize people, profit, and purpose. This forces us to take extraordinary measures and revisit our mission. All right, so he said this to me. He was thinking he's probably the next inspiring book would be written after his communication. Everybody in this crisis feels that how would a Harvard Business Review invites me to communicate? Now we work together, and the next day, this is where we arrived at. Now I'm going to read out the final version of this paragraph. It goes like this. As a business, we are going through difficult times, and that has left us with no choice but to save costs. And that includes letting go of some of our people. I've tasked the HR to coordinate with a recruitment agency to make career transition easier for the people we have to unfortunately let go. Right? Now, which was more purposeful and which was more clearer to all of you? The second one, isn't it? Because communication, to be purposeful, needs to be clear. What is at the core of what you're communicating? And you build from there. But communication also needs to be compelling. Compelling means, does it appeal to the other person? It can be clear, but does it really appeal to the other person? And why is it difficult? Because for us, the speakers, the why is always obvious. But it may not be that obvious for people who are listening to us. I remember in the beginning of my career, when I was working in the technology industry, I was still a young professional, and I was chosen as one of the people to go to the IIMs to recruit new interns for our organization. I was very excited because it's a big ego boost to go back to go to an IIM and recruit people. Go to a B school where you couldn't get in, to recruit people to your organization is always a good ego boost. So the previous day, our organization's CHR, the HR head, came to meet the six of us who were selected to go recruit people from the IIMs. She asked us, we want to ensure that we present ourselves best to those candidates, prospective candidates. There are some big brands who will also want to recruit these people. So we want to ensure that we present ourselves best. So she asked us a question. How will you describe our organization to these candidates you're going to meet tomorrow? Now, most of us said, we will describe it like this. We are a software company that delivers great products, great services to clients around the world across sectors. She said, okay. And then she asked us another question. She said, what does our organization mean to you personally? We thought about it for a second and we said, coming to this office is more than a job for me. I've made so many friends. It gives me meaning. Another person said, uh, I think I'm doing something which contributes to a larger good. Another person said, I think it's so fun and I never have a boring day at work. Then she paused, stared at us, and asked us, why were the answers to the two questions so different? And I said, how are you going to describe our organization to the candidates? You said something that they could Google out or just Wikipedia or just read in a brochure. What you said in the second question is what you need to describe to the candidates. So the next day we went to the IIMs and we introduced ourselves by saying, we are from an organization where work is play. I've not had a boring day in my life. By the way, we happen to make software, that's fine. But we are in a place which is more than just a job. And we had a 100% conversion rate. That is, everybody we wanted, we got on board in our organization. So sometimes we assume that the why is obvious, but for communication to be purposeful, communication needs to be compelling. What appeals to the other person is very important. And the third C is communication to be purposeful needs to be consequential, which means does it achieve its intended outcome? Why is that important and why is that difficult? Because a lot of us are taught to focus on the input, not on the desired output. Meaning, our focus is on to make our communication techniques perfect and not so much about what do we want them to do differently or think differently as a result of our speeches, isn't it? I was seeing this interview of the great and legendary theater artist Asiruddin Shah a couple of weeks ago, and he narrated an incident which I keep thinking about ever since I watched that, and I want to share that with you today, which will tell you how there's a subtle difference between being amazing and being consequential. Now, he talked about Japanese no theater. There's a theater group called No Theater in NOH in Japan, and they're very famous because they codify everything. They codify every action that an actor performs. They codify every emotion that an actor needs to show so that anybody who trains for years learns those codes. And so they're perfect at what they do. They don't do one thing wrong on stage. Now, Nasiruddin Shah goes ahead and says, there was a code or gesture for pointing at the moon as part of the No Theater's playbook. So pointing at a moon had a particular gesture that needs to be done a particular way. There were two actors in the group. Actor one was such a talented actor. He learned everything. He was the master of all the codes. So he knew what actions, what emotions, and what he needed to do. So when he pointed to the moon, the audience would gasp and applaud, saying, "What a perfect action." There was another actor who was not as perfect as this guy. He was just acting naturally. But when he pointed to the moon, the audience would turn back and look at the moon. Right? So, so Nasiruddin Shah tells that there's a choice. You can be technically perfect and get 100 on 100 if a judge is evaluating you. But there's a difference between pointing to the moon and your audience says, "Wow, you so beautifully pointed to the moon," than the audience turning back and actually looking at the moon that you are pointing. So, for any communication to be purposeful, communication needs to be consequential. There's no point writing a beautiful mail for firing people. That's not the purpose of the email. The purpose of the email is how do we communicate this tough message in a way that's simple for everybody involved. So if you go back to the letter that we drafted for the CEO, we talked about I've asked my HR to work with recruitment agencies to make your transition easier. Now that is useful. That is consequential. Not so much about how beautifully you articulate random stuff, right? So the first question which I invite people to normally ask, especially communicating as a leader in tough situations, in disruptive times, in the VUCA world, during a pandemic, is your communication purposeful? And for communication to be purposeful, I can help them put their communication through three filters of: is it clear, is it compelling, and is it consequential? The second question I invite you to ask yourself each time you communicate, especially in difficult times, is your communication helpful? It could be purposeful, but is it helpful? It seems a very simple question, and at the sight of it, you may say, of course, it's helpful. But it's a little tougher than that. Let me give you an example. Till 2 years ago, I was working in India before I moved to London. And as a consultant, I used to travel 3 days a week, nearly every week of my life. And there was one day when I was returning back to Bombay. My flight touched down Bombay, and I was coming back after a 6 week, 6 day trip abroad. And I was really tired because some of my days were 14-hour working days. So when I landed back in Bombay, I had two luggages. One was a suitcase, a heavy suitcase, 25 kg suitcase. The other was a shoulder bag, which is 6 kg shoulder bag. I was really tired. It was nearly midnight. And when I came out of the Bombay International Airport, it's a beautiful airport, Terminal 2, there was this chirpy driver who was assigned to take me home, who was waiting for me. And if you've never lived in Bombay, you should. The culture of the Kali Pili culture, the general culture of Bombay is just fantastic. People are so helpful, and I'm sure everywhere else, but particularly Bombay. And this chirpy driver offered to, he saw that I was visibly tired, and he offered to help me with my luggage. Now he saw me come out of the airport, and he saw two luggages. There was one heavy bag, a 25 kg suitcase, and a lighter shoulder bag. So obviously, being the good Samaritan that he was, being the helpful guy that he was, what would you offer if you were him? The bigger luggage, isn't it? So he took my suitcase to relieve me of the burden. I was so thankful to him. But 5 minutes later, when we were walking together to his car, I realized he had been of no help. Why? Because the suitcase, though it was heavier, had four wheels. All he had to do was push it with his small finger. And I was still carrying 6 kgs of shoulder weight on myself, which I cannot pull or push. I needed to carry it. And I was thinking to myself, his intention was so pure. If only he had asked me what will relieve my burden more, I would have asked him to carry my shoulder luggage, which I had to carry. And I would have pulled the four-wheeler with me to the car. And that taught me an important lesson. Half the times we assume that we are being helpful basis the data that we have in a situation, the data that what we would have liked another person to do to us in that situation. But compassion is all about asking, am I really being helpful here? And in that situation, the driver would have been extremely helpful if only he had asked me, Aditya, how can I be of help? Then I would have told him, carry the smaller bag. But sometimes we don't have the luxury of asking, isn't it? When we can't ask all the time, how can I be of help? Because not everybody knows what help they want in a distressing situation or in a depressing time or in a disruptive time like COVID. I remember, and in these situations, it's very important for us to develop an instinct to understand what the other person will find more helpful, even without asking that person. And I learned this from my mentor, DTM Deepak Menon, who's also the international president of Toastmasters. In 2015, I was at Las Vegas, the World Championship of Public Speaking. I had won the semifinals, which means I had a place in the top 10 the next the next afternoon. It was already 9 in the night, and I was barely ready with my final speech. But you go there prepared for the semifinals. Who knows you're going to win and get into the finals? So I barely prepared my second speech, and I had just prepared an ugly looking draft. Now it was 9 in the night. I called up Deepak, a good friend of mine for the last 12 years, 15 years. So I called Deepak and said, Deepak, I want to discuss my speech with you. Deepak, as usual, said, all right, Aditya, come up to my room. I'm in whatever Caesar's Palace, room number 255, whatever it is. Come to my room. I went to his room with my laptop, with written notes, and with a frustrated looking face. Who does this on a Saturday evening in Las Vegas? Huh? Prepare for the speech. But I had to do that. So I went to his room. And I went to his room and we started doing some small talk. For half an hour, we were talking about random things like India, like Toastmasters, like leadership, general gossip, how the conference went on. And then 45 minutes later, something about me was, poof, I felt so light. And I said, Deepak, it's 10, it must be late for you, and I feel good. So let me go back and continue my preparation. He said, all right, Aditya. And next day, I won the second prize at the World Championship. And I asked Deepak the next day, Deepak, I came to you at such a crucial time for speech advice. I thought you were going to look at my script. I thought you were going to, tear it down, talk about introduction, body, conclusion, the power of three, stage space, posture, hand gestures. But we were talking random stuff that we would do in an otherwise normal day. And Deepak said something very interesting. He said, Aditya, I realized if you really wanted input on your speech, we are at the international convention. You would have probably taken the help of a past world champion who are roaming around here. You know Mark Brown, you know Craig Valentine, you know Jim Key, you know all these folks. If you had texted them, I'm sure one of them would have helped you. Why would you have come to me if it was really about the script? You came to me, I sensed, because you were feeling frustrated and you probably wanted to go back feeling positive. So that's why I thought the conversation we had might have been more helpful for you than me talking about the third line in your second paragraph and all of that. And something in me clicked when I heard that from Deepak. And he was so right, isn't it? So, a cornerstone of communicating in tough times is, are you being helpful? And helpful is not always what meets the eye. So, if someone comes to you with a script, it doesn't mean your value add is always dissecting the script. It could be something else which they are not able to articulate, but you, as developing an instinct, will be able to ask. So, is communication purposeful? Is communication helpful? And the third and last question is my communication tactful? Is my communication tactful? Now, of course, we would, with our egos, say, I'm always tactful in communication. But tactful here means something even more than what we understand. We all learn communication as a linear process, as a rational process, as a left brain process, isn't it? That is the better your inputs are, the better impact you create. But communication in reality is an irrational process. Let me give you an example. Uh, uh, all through my childhood, my mother, like all mothers, like your mother, uh, tried to instill a lot of good habits in me. Did your mother try to do that at the age, say, 6 to 14? My mother tried to make me wake up on time, do my chores, make up my bed, eat and put the plates back in the sink, and be disciplined and do my own stuff, taking charge of my own life. I'm sure all mothers did that. And if you were like me, you wouldn't have done that, even though she tried her best. Right? Most kids don't really listen to the mothers, and because mothers love me anyway, so they're not going to leave me and go. But yeah, so she tried for 6 years, nothing really worked. Fast forward 10, 15 years. Now I'm 25. I was 25 years old. I had just got into my good job. I was earning my own salary. And there was a very famous motivational speaker who had come to town. But this guy is a very famous guy. I don't want to tell his name, but he's a very famous international speaker who had come to Chennai. I was living in Chennai at that time. And he charged 100,000 rupees for a 2 hour motivational talk. And 100,000 rupees is $1,500. That was his US rate. So he had just converted that to INR and charged us 100,000 rupees. I paid probably 2, 3, 4 months of salary, worth salary to attend that talk, because you want inspired, you want to find yourself at that age, and you know that the answer is out there. Not here. It's out there somewhere. Somewhere in a book or somewhere in a speaker lies words and wisdom which will change me, is our premise at that age, isn't it? I won't do the tough lifting, but somewhere somebody holds the answer to change my life. So I attended his speech for 2 hours. I came back so motivated. I thought I found the philosopher's stone. I thought I found the elixir to life, the road to El Dorado, the blue pill, or the secret sauce, the mantra to success. So I came back home. My mother, now 15 years older as well, asked me, son, what did you learn from his speech that you look so bright, you have a halo behind your head? What happened? I said, Mom, I've learned the secret to life. I'll teach you as well. The secret to life that I learned today is you need to be disciplined. You need to wake up early. You need to make your own bed. You need to take charge of life, Mom. That's the secret to life. And my mom looked at me and said, but son, haven't I been saying that for the last 15 years to you? It struck me. Mom, Mom, I don't think he'll give back the 100,000 rupees. Shit, I paid for nothing. But, well, let me ask you this question. Who had more access to the audience? In this case, the audience was me, my mother or that speaker. Of course, my mother had greater access. Who reinforced the message more? My mother. Who loved me more? My mother. Who did I love more? My mother. Whose advice was free? My mother's. But who did I listen to? Some random guy who charged me for it, who had 2 hours of time, not just with me, with 100,000 people in the audience, probably 1,000 people in the audience. So communication is not a rational process. You can't justify why my mother wasn't able to impact me, but one random guy impacted me. So when we communicate in disruptive times or distressing times or tough times, we assume that just because our input is correct, our approach is our intention is right, the communication will create necessary impact. It doesn't, because the audience, our minds are wonky, our personalities are biased, we have unconscious biases. And therefore, communication is irrational. It doesn't follow a path that you wanted to follow. Your audience, what appeals to one audience may not appeal to another audience. If you are the leader, you may probably want to ask, should I say this or should I ask somebody else to say this? Like my mother wasn't successful, but some random guy, because he had 4 blogs and 5 websites and 4 books, he was probably successful. I mean, nothing really changed me, though. I went back to my same good old life. But the 2 days, it's always motivating, isn't it? 2 days after a conference, you feel you want to quit your job and you want to travel the world and you want to speak and talk. But the problem is, everybody wants to be a speaker. Nobody wants to be a good audience. So the point is, my mother wasn't successful, but he was. So in our own communication, we got to ask ourselves, are we being tactful? And tactful is accommodating the fact that my audience is irrational. They're emotional beings. Daniel Kahneman, he got a Nobel Prize for saying that finance and commerce is not all about rationality, it's about behavioral economics, behavioral finance. People invest irrationally, not rationally. Similarly, your audience is irrational, not rational. So I want to wrap up by saying we're all going to find ourselves communicating in difficult situations. If you are a leader, it's going to be on an everyday basis. Now you have a choice to make to communicate with impact. There are 3 questions that may help you. Am I being purposeful? Am I being helpful? And am I being tactful? And with that, your chances for success may increase a bit. Let me pause now, and I'm going to hand it back to Namika. If we have a few minutes, I would love to take a few questions, but I'll leave that discretion to you, Namika. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Aditya. I was totally able to relate with the incident, and inside I was really thinking, when I'm going to get out of this room, I'm going to tell that to my mom. So let us move on to some questions.